Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Well, hello and welcome to MotorWeek podcast number 34. We're coming to you from Studio C at Maryland Public Television in Owings Mills, Maryland, the home for MotorWeek. Joining me in the studio today are road test producer Brian Robinson.
Ahoy.
And I'd like to thank Brian for taking over the hosting duties for the last podcast. He did such a great job. We just might ask him to do it again.
Please no.
And we're also joined today with writer Shamit Choksi.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
And our reporter, Stephen Chupnick.
Hello, hello.
And Stephen does over-the-edge segments for MotorWeek, and today we're going to ask him to stay right here in the chair and not move.
I'll try not to.
You try not to. Good boy. Hey, we're going to talk about the New York Auto Show. We're going to talk about the Infiniti M, new car from them, new flagship car from them, and the surprising Hyundai Tucson. We're going to be looking at the new pricing announcement for the Nissan Leaf and how that's changing the landscape for electric and semi-electric cars. And we'll also look into our mailbag. We've got a question about where our test cars come from. Should evoke some interesting answers from our crowd. But let us now begin with take a look at the New York Auto Show. And I guess I'll start there because on this sitting around this table, I was the key member that went up for the show. You know, we always expect any auto show in the Big Apple to be pretty outrageous. And this year, really, the word solid keeps coming to mind more than anything else. It was a good, solid show with variations on current themes, a few new models, but most of it was, a new model, a new sport model, a new engine for an existing vehicle. However, there was one theme that caught my eye. At this show, we saw a lot of new vehicles coming out with optional engines that are different than what we've seen before. Case in point, Hyundai showed a new version of their Sonata. Already, everybody has seen the car and thinks this 2011 Sonata, gorgeous car. It would stand to reason it would have an optional V6 engine because it's that mid-size class to go up against Accord and Camry. But no, they're showing a 2-liter turbocharged engine that's actually more powerful on paper than most six-cylinders. They're also showing a hybrid. We've seen this same kind of approach over at Buick where they're talking about a new Buick Regal, the performance model, which you might think would have a 6-cylinder or a turbo 6 even in it. It's getting a 4-cylinder turbo. Now, what we're seeing here is the kind of moves by automakers that are necessary to meet the new fuel economy laws that go into effect 2012 model year, which is really about 9 months from now or less, and will keep getting stricter and stricter through 2016. This is going to change the way a lot of cars and trucks are equipped. More 4-cylinder engines, fewer 6s. Many fewer V8s. As a matter of fact, Mercedes is even talking about the S-Class not having an 8-cylinder in the U.S., just being a V6 with a hybrid system on it. So Americans are basically better be prepared for different automotive choices, and unfortunately, they're probably not going to be ready for this. It's probably going to cause some consternation. But this is what's coming, and I think we saw some of it at the show.
Yeah. If we wait till we're ready, we might never be ready. So.
Exactly. And the fact that it's going to come on pretty quick, all these designs are in progress now. A new hybrid from Lincoln, sort of to go up against Lexus, the MKZ. We sort of knew that was coming.
Right.
The Koreans really took everybody by storm. Besides the Sonata, another new flagship from Hyundai, the Equus, above the Genesis. We already thought the Genesis was top of the line. Here's something bigger. Over at Kia, a new Optima, which was a drop-dead-looking, gorgeous-looking four-door sedan. A new Sportage, a new Forte hatchback. They just launched the Sorento, and they're doing a new sport version of that. So the Koreans really on a roll.
It's almost like it's their decade. I mean, it has been that for at least 5 years running now.
And I think you're absolutely correct. I think they're on this roll they're on could well continue. New sport wagon from Acura, the TSX line. The IQ, which we've seen a couple of concepts of, is now going to be a Scion. Tiny little 4-place car that basically is about the same size as a smart car, just a little bit bigger. Mm-hmm. And on and on and on. It was a good, solid show.
John, I also wanted to mention the Chevy Cruze.
Absolutely.
They came out with the Eco version of it. I think it's called the Eco, right? Chevy.
That's
Cruze.
correct.
And the question I have about this car, and you can tell us a little bit about it, but there's just looking at the fact that they are now shooting for 40 miles per gallon with a non-hybrid car.
Right. With a big interior.
With a large interior, with just good packaging. Could that possibly render hybrids down the road obsolete if you can do this without a hybrid system? If you can hit 40 miles per gallon and affordably do it?
I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, a lot of automakers, including some of the German automakers with diesels and so forth, see lots of life in internal combustion engines left, and they think they can squeeze more miles per gallon. Now, they've got to do it. The Cruze Echo, that particular model that will get 40 miles per gallon, and that's a highway rating. That's a manual only, so they haven't been able to do it with an automatic yet. It uses all sorts of trick aerodynamics, super low rolling resistant tires. It's geared so it will accelerate slowly.
Very high.
So, but still, it shows what's possible. Ford's going to probably do the same thing with the Focus. Mm-hmm. But even if it gets 38 miles per gallon, it's got an interior that's almost as big as a Toyota Camry, well, that's better than the Camry Hybrid does.
I think hybrids are never like a be-all, end-all. It's just kind of a bridge to get full electric.
Definitely.
So I think we'll see full electric and more efficient gas engines.
Definitely.
Well, I know with the Cruze, like everybody's saying, is a rumor went around. There was no media invited to this, but some GM execs went down to the Lordstown, Ohio plant where they're going to be making the Cruze, and he announced to all the workers that this is the most important car that GM's going to produce and has produced because of what it's going to do for America.
That says a lot.
That says a lot. I hope he's right. It's got some formidable competition, but I think the good thing for all of us is you're not going to have to give up size for fuel economy.
Just a lot of straight line performance.
Just a lot of straight line performance.
Big cars with 4 cylinders.
And that's actually one of the areas there where the hybrids will excel because, as we all know, hybrids, because of the electric motor, can be very fast. Excellent. Let's move on to a real vehicle that's out now. And Brian Robinson, I'm going to turn this over to you. The Infiniti M, the new one.
Yes, sir. The M is their largest car, their flagship, if you will. They definitely have taken it in a sportier direction. I think Infiniti, more so than Acura or Lexus, is serious about taking on BMW in performance. Look at their G Series sedan. Done really well with that. Similar, taking that feel to the M class. The engine's huge boost in power. The V6 is 330, which is more than the previous V8, and the V8's 100 horsepower more, up to 420. Chock full of techno goodies, as you would expect. I think after driving it, like the first thing I wrote down in my notes was the Infiniti M it's a car that if you bought it and your neighbor saw you roll in the driveway, he'd be like, "Oh, great, Infiniti M, no big deal, that's nice." But then, if you gave him a ride down to the country club or wherever it is you go and you have an Infiniti M, and you gave him a ride down there and he'd be in there and be like, "Wow, this is phenomenal. I had no idea this car was that nice." Similar along those lines.
Don't you think it's a big improvement?
Yeah, big improvements, especially with the performance, as I mentioned, handling. You got a sport model, which you can get in the V6 or V8, and it's good.
I'm particularly just, all of what you're saying I agree with, and then, of course, the interior. I think it's Infiniti's best interior to date. So,
some of the best woodwork out there, no doubt.
It really is impressive, refined, very luxurious. And we were talking about this before, whether they're really, they're stepping it up. Are they trying to shoot for what BMW is doing or what Mercedes is doing? And you tend to think, no, that's not what they're doing. They're doing their own thing in the same light.
I believe so. I think they've kind of gone away from having like an uber techno tour de force, flagship that everyone looks at, but and just
it's understated.
Yeah.
Now it's still kind of a mid-sized car, so they're not really trying to market the old flagship car they had, the QX, the Q series. That was a big car. I mean, that would go up against, I guess, an S class today.
Right.
This is still built on the same chassis as the G-Class. So it's still roughly a mid-sized car. So you don't think they're basically trying to tell everybody that, we're up to a 7 Series BMW level with this car?
I don't think so. I think they tried that, as you mentioned, with the Q, and they weren't exactly successful with it. So, they trying to continue what they do better, and that's make a nice handling midsize.
And you did like driving it?
Yeah, very much so. I would take the V6 is more than adequate power-wise. I would take that with the sport package over the V8. The V8 was just overkill, really.
It's kind of like what we're seeing in a lot of cars, like the Genesis sedan. The V6 is so good. Why do you need the 8?
I think Infiniti is particularly proud of, and I hate to come back to looks, but I was out there for the LA Auto Show when they introed this car. Not at LA, but it was off-site. And, they didn't even give journalists drives of the car. They were just like, look at this thing. You know what I mean? Look at what we've done here. We don't touch it, just look at it, And so, that says a lot.
They seem to have been able to... There's a lot of buttons on the interior. They don't have like a central control iDrive kind of thing like everyone else, but they seem to be able to do it really well. I mean, it doesn't look cluttered at all. Everything's right where you want it to be, easy to navigate. I think it's much better than having a iDrive type control knob.
Infiniti M, I'll let that be the last word. And now, speaking of head-turning designs and unexpected, let's turn to the Hyundai Tucson, second-generation Tucson compact crossover. Shamit, give us some impressions.
Well, we spent some time with this car. Again, we were talking about the Koreans. Here's another example of them making great strides. The Hyundai Tucson is a small crossover that's competing with some 800-pound gorillas, so to speak.
It's
CRV,
a huge segment.
RAV4. Yeah, it might be the segment right now as far as just the mass market's concerned. And they've totally if you put today's Tucson next to yesterday's Tucson, they're two totally different vehicles.
Give me an idea. The first generation Tucson, it was a nice little vehicle, but nothing special looking wise.
Just kind of bland looking. The styling was
generic.
Generic's the perfect word. It wasn't ugly, but whatever. It would drive by and you probably wouldn't take a second look. This thing is really nice looking. You look at this thing and you're like, you may actually question, what was that that just drove by? It has a sculpted look inside and out. Inside's no longer plasticky. It's no longer cheap feeling. It has a refined presence overall.
It was, I'm not sure if it's the first, but it was done by Hyundai's European design studios. And the closest thing I can think to it is look at the styling for the new Ford Fiesta and Ford Focus. It's that kind of swept back, almost like you're wearing goggles, on a motorcycle.
Yeah, nice lines. Headlights are swept back, like you said. As far as driving experience, I think it really leans towards handling over ride. Not to say the ride's bad, but it's certainly more of a fun driver's car, a more youthful vehicle. The only real thing that I think is a shortcoming for the Tucson is its interior cargo room, because it's going up against CRV and RAV4, which are offering almost 70 cubic feet. And this is coming in at 55.
One of the smallest from its class.
Yeah, it really is. So, a family may think twice about that. If you want to just haul around town or do road trips or whatever, it may come up short.
You also mentioned in the road test you wrote about the rear seat doesn't move.
The rear, you're right. That's another thing that competitors offer in this class is that sliding
or reclining
rear seat. And again, yes, the Tucson does not offer that. I mean, you can't have it all, but people may actually make that head-to-head comparison.
When I drove it, I thought this is definitely a different animal. It is. The steering is to the point of, if you're not paying attention, it can be darty. I thought the ride was actually quite stiff on the all-wheel drive. I personally, when you look at a European ride, like what Volkswagen's doing with the Tiguan better. But my understanding, and I have not driven it, is that the front drive model has a much, much, much softer ride. So if you're in the market for a Tucson, depending on where you live, if you live where there's a lot of rough pavement, you might, and you don't necessarily need the all-wheel drive, you might look at the front-wheel drive.
Yeah, back-to-back test drive would probably be a good idea.
Definitely slick-looking inside and out, as you mentioned. I would say that I'm maybe not as impressed with it as I was some of the other Hyundai stuff, like the Genesis and Sonata was incredible. So maybe my standards for Hyundai have have went up a little bit, but
right.
I would say I wasn't impressed with it.
Did you think it had? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did you think there were too many lines, too many joints in the dash? There was something about the interior that I also had a little problem with.
Yeah, I'm not sure I could put my finger on it, but it just, there's a lot of lines, a lot going on. It didn't look smooth or refined, maybe as much as like the Sonata.
Yeah,
other vehicles.
But still a real head turner, and it's selling really well.
And what Brian's saying is also a statement to the brand itself.
Yep.
You know, I mean, if this car is not up to some of the other things in the rest of the brand, I guess they've stepped it up all the way across the board.
Yeah, very, very interesting piece, and we're going to see a lot more interesting Hyundais to come. Now let's turn to our lightning round, where our MotorWeek crew here have the opportunity to share their opinions on topics making the headlines. And this is one that happened right at the beginning of the New York Auto Show press days. Nissan announced that its electric car, the Leaf, which will go on sale in a couple of markets in December and around the country early next year in 2011, will sell for, after $7,500 federal tax incentives, about $25,000. So it's roughly $32,500 MSRP minus $7,500 in federal tax credits for $25,000, and that also works out to a lease of about $349 a month. Now, there's some other extras that have to be thrown in here. If you want the charging system that will enable it to charge up overnight in 8 hours, it's another $2,200. However, that part of that, most of that, comes back as in tax relief as well. So, having said all that, the question we've had for our crowd here is, it's a 100-mile range car under optimum conditions. It's a small 5-door hatchback. The price obviously is high compared to other cars of its size, but given that it's such an unusual animal, do you think it will sell? And here we go.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good price. I think, the early adopters, you look at the people that are going to buy this thing, and maybe, price is almost, I want to say no option to them, but, they're the eco-conscious people that want to drive an eco-freak mobile and be more eco than anyone in their neighborhood. And I think they're going to buy whether it's 25 or 50. So I think it puts more pressure on other manufacturers. I think everyone was kind of assuming they could put out an electric car for $40,000 or $50,000 and people would buy it, like I say. And now Nissan's saying that you're going to have to do a little better than that.
Plus, in some states like California and even in our home state of Maryland, there may be additional local tax credits that drive the price down even more.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the first all-electric mass-produced car in this country. It's a big deal. And I've had neighbors already come up to me and say, I'm definitely buying one of those things. You don't hear that about a particular car. So, I'm still kind of blown away because this car has snuck up on everybody, and I think when it comes out, it's going to surprise everyone. $25,000 doesn't seem like a big price for an all-electric.
Now, Stephen, I know you've been doing some research into what people think on the Internet about the Leaf. Why don't you give us some insight into that?
Yeah, we put this out to our Facebook fans on the MotorWeek Facebook page, and, just before we get to some of the responses, I think people always have a hesitation to do something new.
Right.
It's just one of those things where, do I do it? Do I do it? I don't know.
Change is uncomfortable.
Change is very uncomfortable. A few people were very vocal about not even touching the Nissan Leaf. We had no ways across the board, except for a few people who said, Keith said, nice price, but I'll stick with my TDI.
Well,
and
that's a diesel, and so he's doing very well with that. He's happy with that.
Exactly, and that's something that I've heard off the Facebook page, that people are like the diesel. But one person said, they're happy with Nissan testing the waters. That's Jay. And George said, what about the battery price and ownership? How much will it cost?
Right.
To really maintain.
There's a lot of questions out there.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions, but they're talking about the number I keep hearing about is $7,000 if you have to ever replace the batteries.
I'm sure it's under warranty.
Yeah, it's going to put a lot of pressure on the Chevy Volt to come in its price lower than the $40,000 that was really rumored, which they need to get it under $30,000 for after the tax incentives. Okay. Michelle has rung the bell, so let's move on now to our MotorWeek mailbag. And basically, if you've got a question, we'd like you to visit our MotorWeek.org website, and you could submit your question. And if you're chosen, you'll receive one of these free limited edition MotorWeek T-shirts that I'm showing you right now, right? No, just kidding. Take our word for it. It's worth having. Here's the question. It's from Seth, and he asked, I'm curious as to whether the vehicles that you test on MotorWeek are purchased anonymously from local dealers, or if the dealers and or manufacturers know that they are providing cars to be used and tested on your TV show. Now, I think he's referring to Consumer Reports that always likes to talk about the fact that they go in and buy their cars anonymously. At least that's what they think. And that's not our case. Who would like to answer the question?
Brian,
I mean, we get all of our...
You're our road test producer. You know the cars better than anybody else.
We get all of our vehicles not directly from the manufacturers themselves, but through a delivery company that's their job is to deliver vehicles to the press. So we don't deal with local dealers at all. The manufacturers are definitely aware that these vehicles will be evaluated for our TV show and magazines. Now, everyone assumes that they're highly massaged and went over, and I'm sure that does happen at some point, but actually, to me, it's usually worse than the cars you actually buy. Many of the cars we get are pre-production vehicles.
Right.
So body panels don't fit maybe the way they will on your car, and interior plastics are often a different quality. So,
And also, I mean, the other people that drive the cars before we get them are journalists, and they're not exactly the most, let's say... let's just say that we don't take care of the cars like we actually own them sometimes.
But,
Exactly. So,
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, somebody else will have a car for a week or two, and it goes in, and it gets washed and put some gas in, and it comes right to us.
Right.
Unless it's got a serious problem.
So you may see a Ford pickup on the cover of Car and Driver. 2 weeks later, it's in our parking lot, and that's basically the way that works.
Yeah, so generally speaking, the cars come to us with several thousand miles on them. They generally don't stay in service much past about 6 or 7. And sometimes they have minor faults. Sometimes we're told about those before they come. Sometimes we're not.
Sometimes we create them.
I mean, we are human. We have up to 20 people that go through the cars. But in general, the cars come to us in a reasonable running condition, but I would hope, actually, that the cars you buy look a little bit better than some of the ones we get into test. Okay? Anybody else want to add anything? Stephen, you're the newest member on the staff. What did you think about the conditions of some of our cars?
Well, I think...
I'm afraid to ask.
Well, no, I think, like everybody's going to drive a car the way that they're going to drive their own car, whether it's, work for
Pity
work
the poor car.
And I think that's the true test of how we evaluate cars. No one wants to see an evaluation of a brand new car, because every brand new car, or most brand new cars,
run beautifully,
are going to run perfect.
Right.
So I think it's good that we get some of these cars that have been used.
I'm amazed that people think that we actually go and buy all these cars.
Yeah.
I mean,
this is public radio and public television, public internet, folks.
We definitely need a bigger garage.
We're lucky if we can change some of the tires every once in a while.
Ooh, stop telling on ourselves. I want to thank everybody at the table today. Road Test producer Brian Robinson, our writer Shamik Choksi, our reporter Stephen Chupnick. Also those folks that you may not necessarily hear as much from, including our bell ringer, our producer Michelle Parker, who's with us today, our audio engineer Jim Bigwood, who makes sure that all of this comes through loud and clear, and of course our podcast creator Bob Mixter. I'm John Davis. For all of us at MotorWeek, please go to our website at motorweek.org and watch out for MotorWeek on your local public television station. Till next time, be sure to watch MotorWeek.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.